Good afternoon. Today is January 22nd, 2015. My name is Edna Sussman. I'm a reference librarian here at the Half Hollow Hills Community Library. We're interviewing William Kerr, a naval veteran, as part of our Veterans Testimonial Project and in collaboration with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Thank you so much, Bill, for being here today and participating in our project.
You're more than welcome.
Bill, where and when were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1939, December.
And who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My mother's name was Alice. My father's name was Nevers. My mother was a sales lady and a clerk in a retail store. My father worked for an insurance company in the office.
And did you have any siblings, and what were their names and genders?
I have one older brother. His name was Bruce.
And did he serve in the military at all?
No, he didn't. He had an injury to his arm that he was not able to serve in the military.
Now, what were you doing before you entered the service?
After I graduated from high school, I went to work in a chem lab.
Oh.
And that was only a short period of time because I graduated in 57. And then I went for a few months, and then I joined the Navy.
You enlisted?
I enlisted, yes.
So, since you enlisted, why did you choose that specific branch of the military?
Well, I like ships. I also didn't like the idea of being in a foxhole in case there was any kind of battle. And I liked the Navy uniform, so I decided that I would go in the Navy. Also, they had an offering of a more technical nature than the Army did at that time. People were being drafted in that era.
The offering of different types of jobs, you mean?
Yeah, different service ranks.
Technical. Oh, I see. So what happened when you departed for training camp and during your early days of training?
Well, it was kind of a unique thing in the essence that it was different because I've never really was separated from my home life at that time. And we reported into New York City, and we took a train up to Great Lakes, Illinois, and they then took us up to the training camp. And
where was that?
In Great Lakes.
Oh.
Waukegan, I think it was Waukegan, Illinois was the actual station. And there was a Great Lakes Training Center there. There was a school on one side and boot camp was on the other side. And we went to the boot camp and we were herded in there like cattle. And for a couple of days we stayed in that one area, and then they assigned us to boot camp areas, teams or units. And we then proceeded with the training that they gave recruits.
How long was that training?
I think it was 6 weeks. It was 6 or 12 weeks. I don't really remember the exact amount of time.
And everyone got the same, pretty much? Or did you get specialized training?
No, it was all the same. It was all the same.
Did you, after that, get any specialized training?
I got some electronics training then. After we left boot camp. We went in boot camp in September 25th, I believe. I went into boot camp, and I know I was home for Christmas, and then I had to report back after New Year's because they split it. Half could go New Year's, half could go Christmas at that time of year. And then we reported back to Great Lakes, and then we went through some schooling there. And after that, I proceeded and joined my ship down in Norfolk, Virginia.
By train? By train? Or?
Train. We rode by train. The Navy paid for it, and you went by train.
Do you recall your training instructors, and if so, what were they like?
I don't remember their names, but I can tell you what they were like. I had played athletic sports in high school and that, and I would say that they were more like a coach, a type of person, and they weren't mean or nasty or anything else. And they tried to instill discipline and training and comradeship and things like that. And basically, they were coaches. They coached you.
You felt okay with them?
Yeah, I had no problem with any of that.
So how did you adapt to military life, like the physical regimen, the barracks, the food, social
I really
life?
had no problems. Again, the discipline part of it, they tried to instill more discipline than I was used to, but it wasn't a big deal. The physical PT, they called it physical training, and that was no problem. I was in very good shape. I was only 17 years old. Food was edible.
Was it canned?
It wasn't
or?
great. No, it was cooked. You went through a mess hall, and they had cooks, and it was hot food and that, and that was fine. I actually adapted fairly well. I think I didn't have any problems. I mean, I wasn't overcome with loneliness or depression or anything like that. And they did keep you busy.
It seems young. I guess most of the guys were young.
Navy was all enlistment in those days. I don't think anybody got drafted. And a lot of the guys, like I was 17, so they called that a kiddie cruise or minority enlistment. You went in when you were 17, you got out one day. Anytime when you were 17, and then you got out one day before you were 21.
Oh, why? I wonder.
It was because normal Navy enlistment was 4 years.
Oh.
But if you went in when you were 17, depending on what point it was, you got out just before you were 21. So it could have been 4 years if you went right in. It could have been 3 years. Mine, like I went in September, and my birthday was in December, so I actually did 3 years and a month or something like that.
Oh, you didn't do up until the...
No, they let us out early. They gave us early discharge. The Navy was doing that.
Why?
The reason they did that for me, in my case, was they let me out in November, was because if they kept me till December, I had just passed a second-class petty officer test. They would have had to pay me more money. So they let everybody out. That just made that so they didn't have to then give them the extra money on it. So it was an early discharge. No reason besides that.
Did you have the option to re-up? Did you?
Oh, yeah, they asked it. They wanted you to re-up. Yes.
You didn't?
No, I had that. I enjoyed it when I was there, but I had no desire to stay.
Now, where did you serve? Was it in Norfolk the whole time, or?
The ship's home port was Norfolk, but the ship was always out. We were in. We made cruises to the Mediterranean, the Caribbean. We would just cruise off Florida sometimes. We were seagoing. And my last cruise was left Norfolk in March in 1960, and we came back, I believe it was October 1960. It was a round-the-world cruise.
Wow.
And we were more or less a showboat. It was a guided missile cruiser, and there were only two of us originally, the Boston and the Canberra.
You were on which one?
The Canberra, which was named after the capital city of Australia.
Yeah, yeah.
And in fact, we were in Australia for the Battle of the Coral Sea celebration in 1960, so that was a very big deal, us being there. The Prime Minister of Australia came on the ship, and he gave us a kangaroo, a koala bear, and we gave him stuff and so on.
Nice.
And I believe when the ship was finally decommissioned later on, in the late 60s, I think after the Vietnam War, they gave the ship's bell to Australia.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So when you were sailing, not sailing, but going around the world, I mean, what was your purpose when you docked?
As we were more or less a showboat, we were also, since we were a guided missile cruiser, it was an air defense ship. We had 8-inch guns, but we also had the missiles. And the purpose of the fleet in those days was to keep the carriers alive long enough to launch their planes for an attack against Russia or whatever country was going on. That was the Cold War time with all the worries about atomic bombs and kids hiding under desks, all that kind of stuff.
I remember.
So our purpose was to stop any incoming planes from getting to the carrier. That's what the missiles were for. They were airborne missiles. And when we hit port, port was just goodwill stuff, and we would just go and we could tour and do whatever, sailors do.
Okay. Yeah, what did you do on your off time, off duty?
I did a lot of touring. Like if we were in France or something, I would take bus tours, and we would try to see what the architecture was, visit around, look at the castles, the medieval things, whatever was scenic and that, we would take that. And I also then did the regular stuff too. I'd go out to eat regular food. We'd go drinking with the guys, we'd go drinking, so on and so forth.
Usually with a group.
A group, yeah. Usually it was a bunch of us together. Very, very rarely were guys alone.
And you came back the same day. You couldn't sleep over in town.
It depended on where you were. We could get overnights. As a petty officer, I could get overnights in Australia, and I could get them in Japan. Those were the only two places that we really were able to get overnight liberty. And sometimes we would trade. Like if we could find somebody to stand in our duty, we could take a trip. Like if we were in Cannes, we could go to Paris, but we'd have to get somebody to stand our duty for the 3 days or whatever we were going to spend on that.
What exactly does a petty officer do?
He's a petty officer. It's a rank. He has people reporting to him. It means you have more knowledge of whatever your rate is. Like I was in radar, so I had more knowledge of the radar procedures, the air search, the sea search, the communications. We did all the voice communications with other ships, with aircraft. We controlled the fighter jets that would go find the enemy. It was called air controlling. We did that with an officer. And the petty officer usually supervised guys that were coming up. Newer guys, that would be seamen recruits, seamen apprentice, and those kind of guys.
Helping to train them?
Train them, yeah. Training that and exercise, yeah.
So you weren't in the front lines, there was no combat during
There was
that
no
time.
combat when I was in.
Okay. What kind of friendships and camaraderie did you form, and with whom?
Well, we formed a lot of friendships with, even with guys in other divisions that we work with. There was different divisions. Mine was OI, for instance, which meant operations intelligence. Then there was other ones. Fox division would be fire control. There was bosun mates and that. But if you work with guys, sometimes you would form relationships with them. And if you stood shore patrol with them, that's Navy police, like you were the police for the ship, and you would go ashore, and then you would be a shore patrolman, and then the next night somebody else would be a shore patrolman, and you would be on liberty.
Oh, I see.
So it varied, but yeah, you would make friends in that, and unfortunately, within a few years after I was out, I more or less lost contact with a lot of the guys.
How many servicemen you think were on the ship? Was it a large?
Oh yeah, like 1,400.
Wow,
Something
so it was
like
a
that.
big ship.
Yeah, it was 670 feet long, 30-something feet wide.
What were the accommodations like, sleeping in?
They had racks, and they were 3-tier. They hung by chains.
They hung?
They hung from the ceiling or the overhead, and they had chains. And then in the morning, after you did your quick fold of your blanket, the rack would go up. So they would, to make more space so you could clean around it. Then at night, you would lower it down, and then there would be 1, 2, 3. There'd be 3 of them there.
So it was secured?
It was a World War II ship, yeah.
Oh, World War II ship.
It converted, yeah.
So it was the racks were secured top and bottom, so you didn't sway in the while you were sailing.
They weren't really, well, they were secured like on one side, but they would sway. In fact, if you were in really heavy weather, there were times when we were out in very heavy storms that the ship would list so much that you would have to almost strap yourself in so you wouldn't roll out of your rack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was exciting.
Did you feel
I never
sick?
got sick.
No?
I never got seasick. A lot of guys did. I never
They
did.
did.
Yeah.
Did they give them for something? I mean,
Yeah, they gave him a bucket to throw up.
Wow. Now, how did you stay in touch, especially being on a ship? It must have been difficult with family and friends back home.
By mail.
Okay.
And they would transfer mail, and you would get mail frequently. There'd be delays, but you would get mail.
You would?
Oh, yeah, and they had mail call every day, generally. But if you were working with other ships, what they would do is they would fly. You would send your letters to a central post office, fleet post office, and they would disperse it to that ship, and then they would mail it. They knew where you were going to be, and they would fly it to the nearest port, and then they put on another ship that was going to meet you, and they would highline the mail over.
It must have taken, I mean, I wonder how long it took from the time a family member sent you.
A couple weeks, the
Oh,
most.
that's all?
Yeah, they're very rarely more than that. It didn't take that long.
That's pretty good. So
Yeah.
they had to keep track of where you all were.
Oh, yeah, they always knew where we were.
So they knew how to reach the next destination for you.
Right. And the same thing, we would replenish food. We would get fresh food in the same way.
From the town that you were in, or?
Sometimes we'd get it from the port, and other times it would be just highlined it from a freighter at sea. They replenish at sea.
Oh, wow.
And you refueled at sea also.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you mentioned about recreation, so you did a lot of touring. Did you do anything else when you were in port?
Go to the beach,
Yeah.
depending where it was. Like if it was summertime and you were like in Spain or France or someplace, you could go to the beach. There wasn't too much else for us to do with that. In certain places, like if we were in places like Guantanamo in Cuba, or even in Guam, they might play baseball, or would have a softball game going or something. We could go ashore, and they would have. There really wasn't liberties available because Castro was just taking over Cuba at that time. Later on, and so we would just go and we'd have like a beer party, beach party.
On the beach?
Yeah, and we'd play softball and stuff like that.
What if they had to get you quickly back on the ship? There were no cell phones at that time.
No, they would. They would just make announcements. They would run around with cars with loudspeakers. Because on one occasion, I remember one occasion we had to pull out. There was a hurricane coming, and they just would broadcast over the local radio. Well, it wasn't overseas. We were in Norfolk at the time, and they just went around and broadcast on the radios. And had all sailors report back to your ship, et cetera, et cetera.
You mean they drove around the town in
Yeah,
cars?
and overseas too. Yeah.
And how, in 60 you finished?
Yeah, in November 1960. In fact, it was November 15th, 1960.
So where were you when your tour was over?
Norfolk, Virginia.
So then
The ship had just came back from around the world.
Oh, wow.
And I believe it came back in October. So we were in port for maybe 3-4 months, and then I was discharged out.
And how did you get back home?
I believe I took I either flew or I took a Trailways bus. We used to be able to go get passes to go from Norfolk to New York if I wanted to go home for a weekend or something. I would go home once in a while, but on a 72-hour pass. And they'd actually bring a Trailways bus to the ship because there were so many guys going to New York.
Oh, nice.
And then they would take you all over there. It was just all sailors. Going back was a little harder because not everybody left at the same time, so you'd have to go to Port Authority, get a bus back to Norfolk, and then from Norfolk you'd get to the ship.
So you didn't do that as much?
I didn't go home that much.
That much?
Yeah.
When you went around the world, I mean, what countries did you see?
What countries?
Yeah.
Let's see. I think we started out, we hit Cuba, we went to Guantanamo, then we went through the Panama Canal, stopped in Panama, then we went up San Diego, California, and then we went to Hawaii, we hit Guam, Philippines, Japan, Australia, Singapore, India, Pakistan, went through the Suez Canal, then hit the Mediterranean, Greece, Turkey, France, Spain, and then back home.
Amazing.
I think that was the trip.
Were there purposes for docking in these towns? I mean,
It was a showboat. We were like a goodwill ship, we were showing the might of the United States Navy to the countries. In fact, we were in Hong Kong, too. Hong Kong was a British colony at that point. And I remember that because you could get suits made, handmade suits for like $20. And they were very good. They were English Worcesters and stuff like that. But when we pulled in there, the Chinese newspaper in 1960 said that our missiles were made out of plastic.
why? Just
To downplay the power and the might of the Navy and that. And we used to give all our food waste to they would take all the waste from the ship. The Chinese people, and they'd feed it to their pigs. The pig farm. So they take all the food garbage, because a lot of food was,
Right.
scraping the trays and all that.
Well, that's good recycling.
Yeah, they recycle that. And then for that, and in trade for that, they would paint the whole of the ship.
Oh, wow.
Up to from the waterline to the deck. They painted it.
Nice. Now, we had another fellow that said they called it a tin can.
That was a destroyer.
The smaller boat.
He was on a destroyer. I was on a cruiser. I was on a heavy cruiser.
Okay.
And a tin can was a nickname for a destroyer.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, those were true sailors.
Yeah, yes, less room. Probably felt the rocking.
Well, there wasn't a lot of room, and they were very fast ships normally.
Oh.
And they escorted. They were an escort ship, and also we were an attack ship. They were an escort ship and a protected ship, and they were very low in the water in comparison to a cruiser, and their guns were smaller. Mm-hmm. They had 5-inch guns and 3-inch. We had 5-inch, 3-inch, and 8-inch.
Wow.
Which is a big gun. And the battleship I had 16-inch, so you can see that in the old days
Yeah.
they were very big guns.
Wow. When you returned home, how were you received by your family and community? First of all, did they expect you home then? Or, did you let them know you were
I let them know
home?
I was getting discharged, yeah.
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 So
Well, it was always great. Every time you came back into port, there were a lot of families that would come down that lived in the vicinity, or they had husbands and kids. You would see the wives with the babies waiting for the husbands to come home. I didn't have a wife or
Right.
anything. Right. And it was always nice. It was very warm. Warm. Coming back in was always exciting.
Exciting, yeah.
You're gone for 6 months or 3 months, whatever it was, and you pull back in port. It was always nice.
I'm sure. How did you readjust to civilian life?
I had no problems.
Really?
No.
What happened when you came back? Did you start college or
No,
job,
I didn't
or-
start college. I started working. My first job I had when I got back, I worked in A&S.
A&S.
Yeah, in Hempstead.
Okay, and then?
And then I went to a company called Oxford Pendaflex, Oxford Filing.
Oh,
I
yeah.
left there. And that's where I eventually had my career, was at that company. I
Oh.
stayed with them for 30-something years. I was the vice president of sales when I left.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you remained in contact with or reunited with any fellow veterans?
No.
No. And are you a member of any veterans organizations now?
No.
Now,
Some of them I can't even be a member of because they had to be like veterans of foreign wars. I wasn't in a foreign war, so I couldn't join.
Oh,
So you had to be into a conflict, a time when there was conflicts going on.
oh, I see.
There were no conflicts, no official conflicts when I
Right.
was there.
It's Cold War.
Yeah. I mean, they had things happen like Eisenhower, there were riots in Japan in 1960 when Eisenhower was going to go over there, and there was some kind of treaty they were supposed to sign, and they didn't like it, so they rioted and all that kind of stuff, so he had to cancel his trip there. But there was stuff like that going on.
Were you there then? No.
Yes.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, yeah.
Huh.
And we had, when I said riot, it wasn't a drastically bad riot compared to some you see now with the burning of everything and all that. It was more heavily protested, but nothing drastic. And we always had, like the Russian fleet or ships, they always had, you could tell by the antennas on their ships that they had the kind of gear that they were always trying to pick up war information, frequencies of the radar, the fire control missiles, anything
Of
like
the
that.
US?
Of the U.S., yeah.
Huh.
And we would try to pick their stuff up too, if we saw their Navy ships.
Wow. Were you that close to the Russian ships? I mean,
But they would be in port. Sometimes the freighters and that would be in port,
Oh,
or
I
passenger
see.
ship. The only time we really got close to their warships is that we were going into the Dardanelles, they were coming out. So they were going this way, we were going this way, and everybody got on deck, and we played their national anthem and our national anthem, and it was
nice.
yeah, it was interesting.
Nice. So basically, when you separated from the military, on down the road, you stayed at Oxford. That's what you did.
Yeah,
And
it became Messelte Pendaflex, yes.
what, was that in New York?
Yeah, it was in Garden City.
Oh. Now, how do you think your wartime experiences affected your life? Not wartime, your service, military experience.
I think it reinforced a lot of things. You know, I mean, I made a couple notes on something like that. I think it helped with discipline, teamwork, following orders, leadership qualities, things of that nature. It reinforced. I mean, it was there. If you wanted to take advantage of it, it was there. If you didn't, it's like everything else. You know, you can either take advantage of what's offered by them or not.
Did you have any fellows who didn't adjust well to the
Oh, yeah.
different things? And what happened?
Well, one guy, I'll give you an example of one guy, I'll never forget him. He, I guess he fell in love, and he didn't want to go on a round the world cruise. So he went what they call AWOL, and he missed ship movement, which is very bad. You don't want to miss movement of the ship. But they got him. So what they did was they hooked him back up with us on the West Coast, and they let him ride in the brig around the whole world. He rode in the brig.
What is that?
Jail on the ship. So, and it's not good.
That's terrible.
Well, he shouldn't have missed ship.
Yeah. So he didn't board the ship in time on purpose?
He on purposely he stayed away. He didn't desert. He missed the movement, and then I think he turned himself in after the ship was gone, and that thinking he would just get something minor.
He intended to miss the movie?
Yeah, he was in love.
Wow. And did he stay in the whole tour, his whole tour? I mean,
I don't know what happened to him after that. I just know he was put into the brig and he rode around in the brig.
and what about some life lessons? Other than that, anything you learned from military service?
Well, there was a lot of, you had to entertain yourself a lot of times. You got good habits. So certain habits are very good. On board a ship, you're living in very close quarters, so cleanliness is very important. Bodily cleanliness and things like that. Guys that weren't would sometimes get warned about it.
Oh, you had showers, I mean.
Yeah, they had showers, they had heads and everything else. The discipline was good. There was discipline, there was comradeship, there was leadership things you learn. It was and a routine.
Structured.
Yeah, structured. It was structured, and if you embraced it, you didn't have really any problems. If you fought it really bad, then you had problems because then you could be insubordinate to a superior petty officer or an officer. You didn't want to do that. If you fought with other people, and that you would go before what they call a captain's mast.
A what?
Captain's mast is like a judge.
Okay.
He would be the judge, and depending on what the penalty was. And if guys were on the shore and they got drunk and broke up a bar or something, they'd come back, they'd get a captain's mast to be brought back by the shore patrol, like being arrested, and they'd get a captain's mast, and he would give them punishment. Either take away a rank, give them time in the brig, he could do anything he wanted to. Warning, retraining, stuff like that.
Did that happen frequently?
There was always somebody. I mean, you had 1,400 guys.
Wow.
You're going to have, if you just apply the 10% rule, there's going to be 10% of guys are going to get in some kind of mischief or trouble.
Did most of that group, were you together with that same group of guys other than the ones that their tours ended?
Well,
the whole time?
yeah. They would come and go because of tours ending and so on, yeah.
Right.
And in general, though, most of the guys, like on the cruise, the guys that went on the cruise, but they stayed almost, all of them stayed on board the whole time. They didn't get discharged. Yeah.
So that's nice.
Some of them I was with for over 2 years.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you think your military service impacted your feelings about either war or the military in general?
If anything, it reinforced the military. The feeling for I'm very positive towards our military. These people are giving up years of their life so others don't have to.
Yeah.
And I am very big in that vein. I have very high opinion of the military. It didn't have any negative effect on me. There were times it was boring. There's times when it's boring. You're at sea. It's boring.
Are you allowed to bring things like to read and?
Oh yeah. They had extensive. They would show movies. You're at sea. You could go to movies. The TV wasn't big in those days. You didn't have computers in those days.
Right.
You didn't have cell phones, but you could read, and they had a library on board ship. You could get you could get books, and mostly the guys would buy books also. You could also take courses. You could take college courses. You could take high school courses. You also had to study for your next rate, your rank, to increase your rank on it. You would study.
How would you do the courses? There's no online at that time.
Book.
Oh, from a book.
Yeah, and then you could get help from, say, another, like if a seaman was going for third class or something and I was a petty officer, if he had a question that I could help him with, I would help him with it, or somebody else would help him with it.
Yeah.
Or an officer would help him.
Did you basically, you worked 5 days a week and had the weekends off, or, how?
It varied. Some weekends you might have a duty weekend, some weekends you would have a 48, some weekends you would have what they call a 72. You'd get off Friday night, didn't have to be back till Monday morning. Other times you would be off Saturday and Sunday. And if you had a duty weekend, you didn't get off.
So if you, as you were sailing, you didn't do your expertise things that you're supposed to be doing with the radar?
Yeah, you did.
You did?
When you're at sea, that's what it really was for.
Right.
That's when you did it. Like we'd play war games with the Air Force.
Oh.
They would come and try and sink us, and we would make believe we're shooting them down. And
Okay.
those were very good. It was
Practice.
very good, very interesting. Very long hours. It was really like you were at a war situation.
Wow.
Was practicing for it. But it was a lot of practice.
So it became more routine.
So that when it happened, it wasn't strange to you what you were doing.
Right.
You were performing a function that you would do if it was a real war. So there was practice all the time. And then when you were at sea, the same thing with radar. When you're at sea, you still have to use the radars and everything else because there'd be ships in the oceans. You don't want to crash into them.
Right.
So you'd pick them up on the radar, you'd plot their course, and you would let the captain or whoever was on the bridge know what the course is. Whether there was a bogey or what they call it, or a skunk is a ship. That's the name. A bogey was a plane, a skunk was a ship.
Oh.
And you would tell them the position of it and where we'd cross if they were approaching or moving across your bow, or whether you'd intersect with them or not.
I see. Did you come across a lot of foreign ships on the sea?
Yeah, you'd be surprised, yeah, quite a few. Depending on where you were. If you were in the lanes, they had regular shipping lanes. If you were in the lanes, you would see more. And of course, at sea, you would see magnificent things. Like sunsets like you wouldn't believe. You could see thunderstorms like you wouldn't believe. The stars, there's no lights, so the stars are magnificent. Things like that. There was great beauty in the sea. The sea is a beautiful thing. Yep. And sometimes it was so smooth it was like glass, and other times they were 30-foot waves. So,
But a ship that size, there's no chance of it.
Well, it felt like it was sometimes. If you're in really bad weather, sometimes it would lean over so far and you're just waiting for it to come back, and then it would come back. But it never.
But the waves sometimes would be that big, they'd come onto the ship?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Wow.
Yeah, especially the bow, because you head into them. You try to head into them, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Must have been a little
It was exciting.
disconcerting. Yeah.
Yeah, it was exciting. Makes the adrenaline flow.
Yeah. Now, were you at any time injured on ship?
No, no, I was never hurt. Some guys were. I mean, there was accidents happening all the time,
Right.
but I was never involved in any of that.
So you learned how to shoot guns and things like that from the ship?
Basic, very minor. Don't forget, we're Navy, we weren't Army, but we did go through some basic handling, like of a .45 caliber pistol. I had to qualify with that because on shore patrol we would carry a sidearm.
Oh, you had to?
Yeah, I'd carry a .45 or a .38. If you were prisoner chasing, you would carry a gun, or you would carry a shotgun or something. But in general, you weren't. My group was not. We weren't involved. You could be on landing party, was where you volunteered to go on landing party, or boarding party, where you would board a ship, where you might have to board a ship to search it or do something, and then you'd carry weapons.
Search a foreign ship?
Yeah.
Oh, why?
Could have been an enemy ship, could have been a terrorist ship, could have been whatever they decided why they wanted to board it.
Oh, they would let you on?
They didn't have much choice. You see this 650-foot ship pulls next to you with 8-inch guns pointing at you.
Oh.
What are you going to do?
Oh, so just to check it out and make sure there wasn't going to...
Yeah, I didn't do it. We didn't do it.
Oh.
It was there. It was part of it if you needed to do it, for whatever the reason.
Learn how to do it.
Learn how to do it, yeah. And then landing party was if you would go in to call back coordinates to the guns, the 8-inch guns, so it would be part of landing party that you would go and do that.
How would you call it back?
Radio.
Huh. Did they reach pretty far?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Was there anything you did that you regretted while you were in the service?
Not really. I mean, not really.
Okay.
I never got in trouble. I got a good conduct medal, so
Nice.
I didn't, I didn't really do really bad things, Some guys did. Some guys ended up doing bad stuff. They'd end up in jail overseas. In the country, if they did something really bad to defile the country that they were in or something, or a crime, then they would get locked up and they'd be in the jail there.
And were we able to get them out?
Sometimes you could buy them out, other times you couldn't.
So how long would they end up staying there?
It depends, I guess, on the crime. And you didn't have a lot of stuff going on, like today with drugs and everything. When I was in, I didn't know of any real major drug stuff. Now, I know years later there was, within a few years after that. But at that point in time, I think after Vietnam, there was more drug stuff than that. Prior to that, drugs weren't as heavy. Most of the guys drank, that was what they
Drank,
did.
yeah. What message would you like to leave for future generations who might see or hear this interview?
Well, I think, if there's nothing wrong with making a career of the military if that's what they want, if they so desire. If they don't, they should keep in mind that the military people are sacrificing so that they can pursue their own liberties, these individuals. So, have some respect for the military, and I don't mean you have to flower with them, but, just don't knock them because they are sacrificing and their families are sacrificing.
Sure.
And all these guys that died and are maimed from in Iraq and all these other places, they're doing this voluntarily. And, it's something that should be appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else you feel we haven't discussed or should be added? Anything you can think of, any experiences or things?
No, I told about Eisenhower, Hong Kong, No, the Navy gave me great opportunity to see the world at a young age. By the time I was 21, I probably was in more countries and places than the majority of people in the country. Because I was all over. I mean, we were all over the place. It was a showboat, the ship.
Right. Did you go to the Middle East? You said Pakistan. But
Yeah, Pakistan, and we went through the Suez Canal.
Suez Canal.
Yeah.
Did you dock in
No.
port somewhere? No.
Not in Port Said, no. We went right through the canal and ended up on the other side. And we were mostly in the Med. We were in Sardinia and Italy and Greece and Turkey. And
What about like Israel?
no, we didn't go to Israel. No.
You did a lot.
One of the things that was interesting, we went into a place called Cochin, India. Very poor area. And the local, I guess it was the Communist Party or somebody, told the people there that we were giving away food. So thousands and thousands of people came down to the ship and the Indian police and army had to push them away, get them away from the ship and that.
Oh, wow.
But that was a very, very poor town. It was a place I didn't spend much time ashore. I went quickly ashore and did a quick tour of it and said,
That was
okay,
enough, yeah.
enough of that.
Wow, interesting. Wow.
Yep. Japan was very nice.
Japan, really?
I enjoyed Japan a lot. We went to a lot of places in Japan.
Uh-huh.
And one of the cleanest places was Singapore.
Really?
Yeah. Very strict. You throw a gun wrapper on the street, you get arrested.
Okay.
Yeah, they were very strict. And the punishment was caning.
Oh, my God.
So you behaved yourself.
Yeah, for littering, you mean?
Yeah, littering, anything. Yeah.
Do you pick up a lot of languages at all when you were there?
No, you could pick up words and phrases. Like if you were in France enough, you would pick up certain phrases. One of the big phrases was, is there a bathroom?
Right. Yeah.
One of the interesting things I did see was if we went to France early, and then when we hit it again, I think in '60, I noticed there was quite a change in the population area around Cannes because they had armed Frenchmen around because there was the Algerian crisis, and people were coming from Algeria. There was a lot of conflict at that point, whereas a year earlier or so, there wasn't that conflict. You didn't see that. But you could notice changes in
Sure.
the different areas.
Yeah, yeah. But you basically felt safe.
Yeah, I know. Well, I
ship.
was 17, 18, 19 years old.
Right.
What am I going to be scared of?
I guess not. A lot of guys say the same thing. At that age, you have
You're
no
not afraid.
fear.
No.
Yeah.
And usually with more than one guy.
Yeah,
You know,
together.
2, 3, 4 guys together or something like that.
So you watch out for each
Yeah,
other.
yeah.
That's
One
nice.
guy drinks too much, you take care of him.
It's nice.
Try to.
Yeah.
And we saw many things. I mean, in Greece, like I was to Athens, I saw the Pantheon, you know, all the beautiful things like that. That was wonderful to see, and roads, and you see a lot of that kind of stuff. So the travel, from my standpoint, was wonderful. You know,
Did you use did you get the GI Bill at that time?
I put myself through college with GI Bill.
You did?
Yes,
Where did you go to school?
Nassau Community and then Hofstra.
Oh, okay. What was that was after your service?
Yes,
What was your degree in?
marketing.
Oh, that's why you were in
I
sales.
became sales. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Bill, for your service and for all your memories. We really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure doing it, and hopefully, you know, somewhere it'll help somebody else make the right choices and that.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.